Sir, I need to see your identification and proof of citizenship. You're suspected of using fraudulent veteran benefits.
Officer, I fought for this country. I have a VA card and ID.
Sir,
What crime
22
am I
years.
accused of?
Bronze
Sir,
Star?
please
Purple
cooperate.
Heart.
You can come.
ICE agent Derek Lawson thought he was responding to a routine tip. Anonymous caller, suspicious elderly man at a VA hospital, possible undocumented immigrant using fraudulent veteran status to access benefits. In his mind, it was straightforward enforcement. He had conducted dozens of these operations, relying on profiles and assumptions that had never been challenged. But when he walked into the waiting room of the Memphis VA Medical Center on a quiet Tuesday morning and approached the elderly black man sitting alone in a wheelchair, he made a catastrophic mistake. The man he detained was William "Willie" Carter, an 87-year-old retired Sergeant First Class, a Korean War veteran who had earned a Bronze Star for valor and a Purple Heart for wounds sustained defending a country that was now questioning whether he belonged. Carter was born in Birmingham, Alabama, in 1937, the grandson of sharecroppers, a man who had served 22 years in the United States Army before most ICE agents were even born. And what Lawson didn't realize was that his body camera was recording everything. Every demand for papers, every dismissive gesture, every moment of humiliation inflicted on an American hero, captured in high-definition video that would eventually cost the federal government $14.2 million. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Lawson had been with ICE for 9 years, working out of the Memphis field office with a reputation for aggressive enforcement that his supervisors praised as dedication. He had been named in 7 formal complaints alleging racial profiling, each one describing a pattern of targeting elderly black individuals in public spaces based on nothing more than appearance. His supervisors defended him as thorough and proactive, celebrating his enforcement numbers without examining his methods. He believed his instincts were sharp, that years on the job had given him an eye for who belonged and who didn't. In reality, those instincts were biases, prejudices dressed up as experience, assumptions rooted in racism rather than evidence. The tip had come in that morning at 7:43 a.m. Anonymous caller, male voice, claiming there was a suspicious elderly black man at the VA hospital who was probably using a fake identity to get veteran benefits. No name provided, no specific evidence, no documentation, just vague accusations that any reasonable agent would have investigated before taking action. But Lawson didn't investigate. He didn't call the VA to verify patient records. He didn't check military databases. He didn't do any of the basic verification steps that protocol required. Instead, he grabbed his partner, Agent Michelle Torres, and headed straight to the hospital. Both agents activated their body cameras as they entered the building at 8:15 a.m., the morning light streaming through the lobby windows creating perfect visibility. What those cameras would capture over the next 2 hours would end Lawson's career and become a landmark case in civil rights law. William Carter had lived a life that embodied the American promise, even when that promise was denied to him. Born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1937, he grew up under Jim Crow, drinking from colored fountains and sitting in the back of buses. His father worked the steel mills. His mother cleaned houses for white families. And young Willie learned early that being black in America meant fighting twice as hard for half as much. When he turned 17 inches, 1,954, he enlisted in the United States Army, not because he believed his country loved him, but because he believed in what it could become. He shipped out to Korea within a year, a teenager from Alabama suddenly fighting in frozen mountains on the other side of the world. During a brutal firefight near the Imjin River, Carter carried 3 wounded soldiers to safety under enemy fire, taking shrapnel in his left leg that would trouble him for the rest of his life. That action earned him a Bronze Star for valor and a Purple Heart for his wounds. He served 22 years, rising to Sergeant First Class, training young soldiers, deploying wherever his country needed him. After retiring from the Army, he worked 30 years for the United States Postal Service, another form of service to his nation. His wife Dorothy passed in 2019. He had 4 children, 6 grandchildren, and a small house in Memphis filled with photographs and medals and memories. On that Tuesday morning, Carter was at the VA hospital for a routine appointment, the shrapnel in his leg still causing pain 7 decades later. He wore his Korean War veteran's cap, the same cap he wore every time he visited the VA, proud of his service despite everything his country had put him through. The Memphis VA Medical Center was quiet that Tuesday morning, October 15th, the waiting room, half filled with veterans of various ages waiting for appointments. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and morning sunlight poured through the large windows facing the parking lot, creating bright, even lighting throughout the space. Carter sat in his wheelchair near the window, his Korean War veteran's cap resting on his gray hair, his VA health identification card clipped to his jacket pocket. He had arrived early, as he always did, a habit from his military days. He was reading a newspaper, occasionally glancing up at the television mounted on the wall showing morning news. At 8:15 a.m., the automatic doors slid open, and Agents Lawson and Torres entered the building. Their body cameras were already recording, capturing the lobby, the reception desk, the hallway leading to the waiting area. Lawson's camera recorded his perspective as he scanned the room, his head turning slowly, methodically. The footage would later show exactly what he saw. Elderly veterans sitting in chairs, some in wheelchairs, some with walkers, most of them white. And there, near the window, sat William Carter, the only black patient in the waiting area. Lawson's camera captured the moment his gaze locked onto Carter, the way his posture shifted, his hand moving to rest on his belt. He didn't look at anyone else. He didn't approach the reception desk to verify information. He walked directly toward the 87-year-old black man in the wheelchair, his partner following 2 steps behind, both cameras recording every step in crystal clear detail. The Memphis VA Medical Center was quiet that Tuesday morning, October 15th, the waiting room half filled with veterans of various ages waiting for appointments. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and morning sunlight poured through the large windows facing the parking lot, creating bright, even lighting throughout the space. Carter sat in his wheelchair near the window, his Korean War veteran's cap resting on his gray hair, his VA health identification card clipped to his jacket pocket. He had arrived early, as he always did, a habit from his military days. He was reading a newspaper, occasionally glancing up at the television mounted on the wall showing morning news. At 8:15 a.m., the automatic doors slid open, and Agents Lawson and Torres entered the building. Their body cameras were already recording, capturing the lobby, the reception desk, the hallway leading to the waiting area. Lawson's camera recorded his perspective as he scanned the room, his head turning slowly, methodically. The footage would later show exactly what he saw. Elderly veterans sitting in chairs, some in wheelchairs, some with walkers, most of them white. And there, near the window, sat William Carter, the only black patient in the waiting area. Lawson's camera captured the moment his gaze locked onto Carter, the way his posture shifted, his hand moving to rest on his belt. He didn't look at anyone else. He didn't approach the reception desk to verify information. He walked directly toward the 87-year-old black man in the wheelchair, his partner following 2 steps behind, both cameras recording every step in crystal clear detail. Lawson stopped directly in front of Carter's wheelchair, his shadow falling across the old man's newspaper. His body camera captured Carter looking up, confusion flickering across his weathered face. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your identification and proof of citizenship," Lawson announced, his voice loud enough that nearby veterans turned to look. Carter folded his newspaper slowly, his hands steady despite his age. "Excuse me? Identification and proof of citizenship," Lawson repeated. "We've received information that you may be in this country illegally, using fraudulent documents to access veteran benefits." Carter stared at the agent for a long moment, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to quiet anger. The body camera captured every detail of his face in the morning light. "Son," he said, his voice carrying the deep calm of a man who had faced enemy fire, "I fought for this country before you were born. I bled for it in Korea." "That doesn't answer my question," Lawson said dismissively. His camera recorded his own hand gesturing toward Carter's cap. "Anyone can buy a hat," Carter reached for the VA health card clipped to his jacket, holding it up along with his Tennessee driver's license. Torres's camera captured the documents clearly. Carter's name, his photograph, the VA identification number. "This is my VA card. This is my license. I've been coming to this hospital for 40 years. Lawson barely glanced at the documents. "These could be fake. We're going to need you to come with us for verification." Around the waiting room, other veterans were beginning to stir, their attention drawn to the confrontation. An elderly white man with a Marine's cap lowered his magazine, watching with narrowed eyes. Carter's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady, the discipline of 2 decades in uniform holding firm. "Officer, what crime am I being accused of? What is your probable cause for demanding my documents?" "I'm a patient at this hospital. I have identification." "What more do you need?" Lawson's body camera captured him leaning closer, his posture aggressive, his voice taking on that particular tone meant to intimidate. "Sir, I'm not going to ask again. You can cooperate and come with us voluntarily, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice." Carter's hands began to tremble, visible on Torres's camera. The same hands that had held an M1 rifle in the frozen mountains of Korea, the same hands that had carried wounded brothers to safety under enemy fire, now shaking as a man in his own country threatened to arrest him. "I served 22 years in the United States Army," Carter said, his voice rising slightly. "I have a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. I paid for my citizenship in blood, son. You have no right to do this. Should veterans be forced to prove their citizenship at VA hospitals? Comment below." This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an American hero being treated like a criminal in a building dedicated to serving heroes like him. Lawson straightened up, his decision made. "Sir, you're being detained for identity verification. Stand up." "I'm in a wheelchair," Carter said, the words heavy with exhaustion and disbelief. "I can't stand without assistance." "My leg," Lawson pulled out his handcuffs, and the metallic click as he opened them echoed through the silent waiting room. Both body cameras captured the sound with perfect clarity. "Then we'll do this seated. Hands behind your back." The waiting room erupted before Lawson could touch Carter's wrists. "Hold on just a damn minute." A white man in his 70s pushed himself up from his chair, his Vietnam veteran's cap sitting above eyes blazing with anger. His voice was loud, commanding, the voice of someone who had once led men in combat. "That man has a Bronze Star. I've seen him here for years. What the hell do you think you're doing?" Lawson's camera swiveled toward the man. "Sir, this is federal business. Sit down." "Federal business?" Another veteran stood, younger, maybe 60s, an Army airborne patch on his jacket. "You're arresting an old man in a wheelchair at a VA hospital. This is insane." Torres shifted uncomfortably, her camera capturing the growing crowd of angry veterans, some reaching for their phones, others moving closer. A nurse rushed from behind the reception desk, her footsteps rapid on the tile floor. "Excuse me," she said, slightly breathless, her face appearing in Lawson's camera frame. "This man is William Carter. He's been a patient here for decades. I can pull his records right now. He's a verified veteran." "That won't be necessary," Lawson said coldly, his hands still gripping the handcuffs. "We'll verify his status at our facility. This is federal business." The hospital's security cameras, mounted in the corners of the waiting room, captured the scene from multiple angles as Lawson secured the handcuffs around Carter's thin wrists. Torres wheeled him toward the exit, past rows of veterans watching in stunned silence. Carter held his head high, his Korean War veteran's cap still on his head, his eyes filled not with fear, but with quiet fury. He had survived segregation. He had survived combat. He would survive this. The transport van pulled out of the VA hospital parking lot at 8:47 a.m. Both body cameras still recording. Lawson drove while Torres sat in the back with Carter, her camera capturing the elderly man's face as he stared out the small window, watching the city he had called home for 60 years pass by. Carter spoke without being asked, his voice clear and deliberate, knowing the cameras were recording. "My name is William James Carter. I was born November 3rd, 1937 inches, Birmingham, Alabama. I enlisted in the United States Army on June 15, 1954. I served in the Korean War with the 24th Infantry Division. I was awarded the Bronze Star for Valor and the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. I retired as Sergeant First Class after 22 years of service. My service number is RAON 4457832. Every word was captured with perfect audio clarity. Torres shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her camera recording her own hands fidgeting in her lap. The drive to the ICE detention facility took 35 minutes. When they arrived, Lawson's camera recorded the intake area, the fluorescent lights harsh after the morning sun. He wheeled Carter to the processing desk where an officer named Sergeant Diana Wells sat behind a computer. Lawson explained the situation, his voice confident, certain he had made a good catch. Wells began typing, running Carter's information through federal databases. Her fingers stopped. She typed again. Scrolled. Her expression changed, the shift captured on Lawson's body camera. The silence stretched for 15 seconds that felt like an hour. "This man is a United States citizen," Wells said slowly, her voice tight. "Born in Birmingham. 22 years of military service. Bronze Star. Purple Heart." She looked up at Lawson, her eyes cold. "He's in the Federal Veteran Database. He's been receiving VA benefits for 40 years. What exactly did you think you were doing?" Carter was allowed one phone call. The facility's recording system captured every word as he dialed his daughter's number with trembling fingers. Patricia Carter Robinson answered on the second ring, her voice professional, clipped. Colonel Patricia Carter Robinson had served 28 years in the Army, retiring just 3 years prior, following in her father's footsteps. "Patty," Carter said, and his voice finally cracked, the composure he had maintained for hours fracturing. "Baby girl, I need your help. They arrested me. Daddy?" Her voice shifted instantly from professional to alarmed. "What are you talking about? Who arrested you?" "ICE agents. At the VA hospital. They said I was illegal. They put me in handcuffs, Patty." In front of everyone. The recording captured Patricia's sharp intake of breath, then a long pause as she processed what her father was telling her. Her voice, when she spoke again, was ice cold, the voice of a woman who had commanded soldiers in combat zones. "Where are you right now? What facility?" Carter gave her the address. "I'll be there in 2 hours," she said. "Don't say anything else to anyone. Do you understand me? I'm calling everyone I know." Patricia Carter Robinson spent the next 90 minutes on the phone. She called the Army JAG Corps, where she still had contacts. She called the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. She called 2 civil rights attorneys recommended by fellow veterans. She called a reporter at the Memphis Commercial Appeal. Despite verification confirming Carter's citizenship within an hour of arrival, he was held for 6 hours and 23 minutes. When he was finally released at 3:15 p.m., the explanation offered was administrative error requiring processing time. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just hollow bureaucratic language that erased the trauma inflicted on an American hero. Patricia Carter Robinson arrived at the detention facility 17 minutes after her father's release, flanked by 2 attorneys she had contacted during the drive. She found her father sitting in a plastic chair in the lobby, his Korean War veteran's cap still on his head, his wrists bearing red marks from the handcuffs. She knelt beside his wheelchair and held him, neither of them speaking, while the attorneys began making calls. Over the next 3 weeks, Patricia assembled a legal team that would dismantle the government's case piece by piece. She gathered her father's military records from the National Personnel Records Center, his original birth certificate from Birmingham, his Bronze Star citation signed by a general, his Purple Heart documentation, his 22 years of service history, his 30 years of postal employment records, his 40 years of VA medical files. The attorneys filed Freedom of Information Act requests for all body camera footage from both agents, every second from activation to deactivation. They subpoenaed the VA hospital's security camera recordings, which provided additional angles of the confrontation in the waiting room. They obtained the facility's intake recordings, including Carter's phone call to his daughter. Lead attorney Marcus Webb, a civil rights specialist with 30 years of experience, reviewed the evidence in his Memphis office, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across stacks of documents and multiple screens showing synchronized footage. "I've handled hundreds of civil rights cases," Webb told Patricia, his voice quiet with barely contained anger. "Police misconduct, wrongful arrests, racial profiling at every level. I've never seen evidence this damning. They have their own agent, on his own camera, arresting a Bronze Star recipient for being black." The federal lawsuit was filed 6 weeks after Carter's detention. The complaint alleged Fourth Amendment violations, false arrest, unlawful detention, racial profiling, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The defendants, the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Agent Derek Lawson, and Agent Michelle Torres. The government's first settlement offer arrived 8 weeks after the lawsuit was filed. $200,000, contingent on a confidentiality agreement and no admission of wrongdoing. Webb rejected it within the hour. Their second offer came a month later, $500,000. Rejected, $750,000 with a formal letter of apology. Rejected. "This isn't about money," Webb told the government attorneys during a conference call. "This is about an 87-year-old war hero who was handcuffed in a VA hospital for the crime of being black. You don't get to buy silence on this one." The government's legal strategy attempted to frame the incident as an honest mistake based on reasonable suspicion. The anonymous tip, they argued, provided sufficient basis for investigation. Agent Lawson was simply following protocol in a difficult situation. Webb demolished this defense systematically. In his response brief, he wrote, "What was suspicious about William Carter? He was sitting in a VA hospital waiting room, wearing a Korean War veteran's cap, with a VA identification card clipped to his jacket. He was there for a medical appointment, like thousands of other veterans that day. The only thing that distinguished him from every other patient in that waiting room was the color of his skin. That is not reasonable suspicion. That is racial profiling." During depositions, Lawson could not articulate any specific behavior that had made Carter suspicious. He stumbled over questions about why he had approached Carter and not other patients. He admitted he had not contacted the VA to verify Carter's patient status before making the detention. He admitted he had not checked military databases. His camera had recorded him doing none of the basic verification steps that could have prevented the entire incident. Expert witnesses testified about implicit bias in immigration enforcement, about the documented pattern of Black Americans being disproportionately targeted for citizenship verification, about the particular cruelty of questioning the belonging of those who had served their country in uniform. The trial began on a Monday morning in the United States District Court for the Western District of Tennessee. The courtroom was packed before the doors officially opened. Veterans groups had organized caravans from across the state. Men and women in caps bearing the names of wars from Korea to Afghanistan, filling the gallery benches. Civil rights advocates sat alongside them, and national media occupied every available seat in the press section. The atmosphere was electric, heavy with anticipation and anger. On the trial's second day, the body camera footage was played on 4 large screens positioned throughout the courtroom. The jury of 12 watched in absolute silence as the events unfolded from multiple angles. They saw Lawson scan the waiting room and lock onto Carter. They saw the elderly man in his wheelchair, his Korean War veteran's cap visible, his VA card clipped to his jacket. They heard every dismissive word, every threat, every moment of escalation. They watched Carter's hands tremble as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. When the footage ended, 2 jurors were crying openly. William Carter testified on the 3rd day. His daughter wheeled him to the witness stand, and he sat with his back straight, his medals pinned to his jacket, his eyes clear despite his 87 years. He spoke about Birmingham in the 1940s, about enlisting at 17, about the frozen hills of Korea where he had watched friends die. He described carrying wounded soldiers through enemy fire, the shrapnel that still lodged in his leg. And he described sitting in handcuffs in a van, being processed like a criminal, watching officers realize their mistake and say nothing. "I was willing to die for America," Carter said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I took bullets for this country. I never thought America would treat me like I didn't belong." Lawson's testimony collapsed under Webb's cross-examination. He could not explain why he had targeted Carter. He could not justify his failure to verify information before acting. He sat sweating under the courtroom lights while his own body camera footage played on the screens behind him. In closing arguments, Webb stood before the jury and spoke quietly. William Carter earned his citizenship in blood on a Korean hillside 70 years ago. He served 22 years defending this nation, and on October 15th, he was handcuffed in a VA hospital for one reason only: he was black. That is not a mistake. That is a civil rights violation. The jury deliberated for 2 days, 47 hours of discussion behind closed doors while Carter waited at home, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, unable to sleep. When the call came that a verdict had been reached, the courtroom filled within an hour. Veterans who had attended every day of the trial returned, some driving hours to be present. The jury foreman, a middle-aged white woman who had served as an Army nurse, stood to read the verdict: guilty on all counts. The words echoed through the silent courtroom: Fourth Amendment violations, false arrest, unlawful detention, racial profiling, intentional infliction of emotional distress, unanimous on every count. The damages phase lasted 4 days. The jury heard testimony from Carter's physician about the physical toll the stress had taken on his elderly body. They heard from a psychologist about his nightmares, his new fear of leaving his home, his anxiety attacks when he saw law enforcement vehicles. They heard from his daughter about watching her father, a decorated war hero, flinch at the sight of a uniform. They heard about the destruction of his sense of belonging in the country he had served for 22 years. When the jury announced the damages, the courtroom erupted. $8.5 million in compensatory damages for emotional distress, physical suffering, and violation of constitutional rights. $5.7 million in punitive damages, calculated specifically to send a message that this conduct would not be tolerated. Total, $14.2 million. Carter sat motionless in his wheelchair as his family surrounded him, as fellow veterans reached over the gallery railing to clasp his hand. Tears streamed down his weathered face. Lawson was terminated within 72 hours of the verdict. His supervisors received formal disciplinary action. Torres, who had remained silent during the arrest, was suspended and reassigned to a desk position permanently. The verdict sent shockwaves through federal law enforcement. Within 3 weeks, the Department of Homeland Security announced sweeping policy reforms directly citing the Carter case. New protocols required agents to verify citizenship through official databases before any detention could occur. Special protections were implemented at VA facilities nationwide, requiring agents to coordinate with hospital administration and confirm patient status before approaching any individual. Anonymous tips alone would no longer justify enforcement action without corroborating evidence. Mandatory training programs were rolled out across all ICE field offices, focusing on veteran identification, military records verification, and recognition of service documentation. The training included Carter's body camera footage as a case study in how implicit bias leads to catastrophic violations of civil rights. Agents were required to pass quarterly assessments on constitutional protections and proper verification procedures. Carter used a portion of his settlement to establish the Carter Veterans Justice Fund, a nonprofit organization providing free legal representation to veterans facing discrimination, wrongful detention, or denial of benefits. The fund partnered with law schools across the South, training a new generation of attorneys to defend those who had defended the nation. Within its first year, the fund took on 47 cases. His story became required viewing at law enforcement academies in 12 states. Instructors used the footage to teach recruits about the consequences of assumption-based policing, about the humanity of every person they encounter, about the particular debt owed to those who served. The case sparked a national conversation about how Black veterans are treated, about the bitter irony of fighting for freedom abroad while facing discrimination at home. Veterans organizations issued statements. Congressional hearings were held. For the first time, many Americans confronted the reality that the uniform does not protect black service members from the suspicions of their own countrymen. William Carter was 87 years old when Agent Derek Lawson walked into that VA hospital waiting room. He had survived segregation in Birmingham. He had survived combat in Korea. He had survived 60 years of building a life in a country that often questioned whether he belonged. And on a quiet Tuesday morning, while waiting for a routine medical appointment, he was handcuffed and detained for the crime of being black. The irony is almost unbearable. A man who fought for freedom, who bled for the Constitution, who spent 22 years defending American values, was treated as a foreigner in the nation he had served. The body camera that Lawson activated that morning was meant to protect officers from false accusations, to provide clarity in disputed encounters. Instead, it captured every moment of injustice, every dismissive word, every second of humiliation inflicted on an American hero. That footage became the evidence that held the government accountable, that forced reform, that proved what Carter had experienced was not a misunderstanding but a violation. At 88, William Carter is not just a soldier anymore. He is a civil rights champion, a man whose dignity in the face of injustice changed federal policy and inspired a nation. His medals hang on his wall alongside the framed verdict, reminders that the fight for equality never truly ends, that every generation must defend the freedoms others fought to secure. If you believe that those who served this country deserve protection, that veterans should never have to prove they belong, and that racial profiling has no place in American law enforcement, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Tomorrow we have another story of courage and accountability that you won't want to miss, because those who served this country deserve to be recognized as citizens, not suspected as criminals. This case was brutal, but the case on the right spirals completely out of control.